Drowning in the tightest section of a pitch-black underwater cave, two panicking divers fight for their lives in the worst possible situation. Jacob's Well, a stunning, clear water spring in central Texas, draws people every summer to swim and dive. It's not just for casual swimmers, but for daredevils looking for extreme adventure. However, beneath its calm surface lies one of the most dangerous underwater cave systems in the world. In November 1983, two Texas State University students, Richard Patton and Clark McConnell, were drawn to the well's depths. They were confident and eager, but the well had secrets that would test their skills like never before. As they prepared to dive, the shadows of previous tragedies seemed to linger in the cold, still water. Both were experienced divers, confident in their skills and eager to push their limits. They were part of an advanced diving course taught by Don Dibble, a seasoned diver with decades of experience. Don, a former Navy and rescue diver for Hays County, knew Jacob's Well's risks all too well. He had warned his students repeatedly, recounting past tragedies in his own near-fatal encounters. But Richard and Clark, undeterred by these warnings, were obsessed with the stories of hidden chambers and unexplored depths. They saw the well as a challenge, an adventure that would set them apart. They were not the first to fall under the spell of Jacob's Well, and they would not be the last. On the evening before Thanksgiving, Richard and Clark decided to explore Jacob's Well. Little did they know, this dive would become a harrowing fight for survival. The air was heavy with an eerie silence as they arrived at the well. The fading light cast long shadows that danced on the water's surface, as if warning them of the darkness below. They put on their gear, checked their equipment, and took a final breath of the cool evening air before descending into the water. As they entered the well, the initial dive was straightforward. The first chamber, at a depth of 25 feet, was wide and open, a simple descent for divers of their experience. They moved smoothly through the water, the beam of their flashlight slicing through the dark, clear water. They reached the bottom of the first chamber with ease and continued into the second chamber, a similarly open space that gave them no trouble. Jacob's Well is divided into 4 chambers. As divers descend from 1 to 4, the spaces become narrower, darker, and more difficult to navigate, increasing the peril with each level. The well's cold, clear water seemed to grow darker and more foreboding, wrapping around them like a shroud. The entrance to the third chamber was a narrow, gravel-strewn passage that required careful navigation. They squeezed through, feeling the cold, rough walls press in around them. The water here was colder, like ice. They paused to collect themselves, exchanging a glance that mixed excitement with fear. Every sound was amplified, every breath echoing in the tight space, adding to the sense of suffocation. They moved forward, the passageway narrowing even further. The sense of claustrophobia was overwhelming. The walls pressed in on them, and the silt stirred by their movements turned the water into a dark, murky fog. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of their own breathing. Divers must be cautious of the false chimney in the second chamber, a deceptive dead end that looks like the exit but leads nowhere, often trapping divers in its depths. They reached the small hole that led to the fourth chamber, but there was a gate blocking the entrance. Determined to explore further, they pried open the gate, metal creaking ominously in the silence. As the gate swung open, it felt as though they had just opened the door to their own doom. This risky maneuver would soon plunge them into a nightmare situation. Richard went first, removing his tank and pushing it into the fourth chamber before wiggling through the narrow opening. Clark watched him disappear into the darkness, a sense of unease creeping over him. Suddenly, Richard came swimming back towards him, eyes wide with terror, screaming silently through the water. Richard had lost his mouthpiece and tank, and was now desperately trying to escape the narrow entrance of the fourth chamber. Clark frantically tried to pull Richard out of the narrow chamber. Once Richard popped out, they began buddy breathing, one diver breathing while the other held their breath, a last resort technique used only in emergencies. They coordinated their movements, passing the regulator back and forth, each breath feeling like it could be their last. They swam as quickly as they could towards the surface, moving through the third chamber, then the second. Suddenly, they hit their heads on the rock ceiling. They realized with horror that they had swum down a false chimney, a dead-end passage. Worse still, they heard the awful thug of their tank running out of air. Clark took a full breath just as the air depleted. He immediately turned and made his way out of the false chimney, racing against time. Richard, however, was not as lucky. In total darkness, Richard struggled to find the surface. Panic set in as he desperately tried to breathe, but there was no air left. Clark broke the surface and gasped for breath, the cold night air a painful relief. He turned, expecting to see Richard beside him, but the surface of the water remained undisturbed. Richard was still down there, trapped in the darkness. Clark waited, his heart pounding in his chest. Seconds stretched into minutes, and he knew with a sickening certainty that Richard was not coming back. He swam to the shore and called for help, his voice hoarse with desperation. Don Dibble received the call and arrived at Jacob's Well within the hour. The well he knew so well had claimed yet another life. He was devastated to learn it was two of his own students involved. Despite his warnings, despite his best efforts, the lure of the well had been too strong. Don's history with Jacob's Well was filled with near tragedies and rescues. In 1979, Don had recovered the bodies of Kent Moken and Mark Grasher, who perished in the fourth chamber. Haunted by their deaths, he attempted to block the passage, but determined divers removed the barriers. His very own near-death experience in the fourth chamber made his warnings even more urgent. During a recovery mission, he became trapped by a gravel slide, unable to signal for help. As his air dwindled, he resigned to his fate, but a last surge of survival instinct allowed him to escape. This harrowing experience fueled his dedication to preventing further tragedies. Don's rescue operation, which turned into a mission to retrieve Richard's body, was grueling. The lower chambers were silted out, making visibility almost non-existent. The divers had to move slowly, methodically, their progress hampered by the very environment that had trapped Richard and Clark. When his body was finally recovered, he was found jammed at the very end of the false chimney, the stillness of the water now a tomb. The weight of the tragedy settled heavily on Don. He had seen too many lives lost to Jacob's Well, a bitter reminder of the risks inherent in cave diving. In the years that followed, Don continued to advocate for safety and awareness. He worked tirelessly to prevent further tragedies, but the well's allure remained. The Hays County Parks Department eventually authorized a single group, the Jacob's Well Exploration Project, to explore beyond the 40-foot depth. A grate was installed at the 40-foot mark, restricting access to the deeper chambers. Despite these measures, Jacob's Well continued to claim lives. In the years following Richard's death, other divers met similar fates, drawn by the promise of adventure, the thrill of exploration. The well's depths remained a mystery and a temptation that few could resist. The tragic death of Richard Patton is a haunting reminder of the thin line between adventure and tragedy. It serves as a cautionary tale for all who seek to explore the unknown, a stark illustration of the dangers that lie beneath the surface. His death wasn't an isolated incident. Jacob's Well has a long history of fatal accidents, each one a testament to the perilous nature of cave diving. Over the years, the well has claimed the lives of at least 8, possibly as many as 12, divers. Each tragedy is a stark reminder of the unforgiving environment beneath the surface, where even the slightest miscalculation can have deadly consequences.